It's not everything, okay? So no panicking allowed. So what's the autonomic nervous system? Yeah, we don't think about that stuff. We don't have control over that stuff. It's autonomic is automatic. Yes? So just like all the other stuff that we've discussed in this nervous system unit, every pathway, every place is very specific. So what they're going to do in this chapter is go over every pathway and every place in the specific endpoint. I'm not going to make you memorize all that stuff. Okay? Again, when you go on to brain surgeon school, it'll be familiar and you'll say, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And when you study your brain surgery, then you'll have to know that all. Okay? But for us, we don't have to know that all. We have to understand that the autonomic nervous system is sending message, sensory, motor, all of that good stuff, integrating information that happens automatically. You know, heart rate, breathing rate. Sometimes I have to speed things up and sometimes I have to slow things down. So what we're going to see is a combination of both of these, and there's a name for both of them. What's the name for both of them? Sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system, which are in the peripheral nervous system. So we're back to that ever-present chart that I told you would see throughout this entire unit, that we started way back when we talked about who? The central nervous system, which consisted of what? The brain and the spinal cord. And then we went on to the peripheral nervous system, which consisted of sensory and motor. Now, the motor division, the effect, can be somatic or autonomic. So now we're into the autonomic nervous system. See how it's all broken down in your book? And again, the book is going to talk about very specific pathways of the autonomic nervous system, both and parasympathetic. So we have innervation, sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation to these groups. We need both. For example, respiratory system. I was at the gym this morning on my treadmill. That was an example of me on my treadmill. So what I have to do, how are these guys going to help me out? Who has to speed up? Well, sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, automatic stuff. I didn't have to get on the treadmill and go, okay, now it's time to speed up innervation to my skeletal muscles. Did I have to do that? God help me, there's way too many things to think of. I'm glad I didn't have to think of it. It happens automatically. So I started to walk on my treadmill. Another example of me walking on my treadmill. What has to happen? Speed up what? Sympathetic division has to speed up what? I'm walking on my treadmill. So I have to speed up delivery of goods to my skeletal muscles that are walking on my treadmill, right? How? Heart rate, breathing rate have to increase. So delivery can increase. I can get more blood to my muscles, deliver more oxygen, get rid of more waste products. All that stuff has to speed up. Sympathetic division. The timer goes off, I say, thank God. And I get off the treadmill. What now? Everything's sped up. Do I still need that? Why? Yeah, my muscles aren't contracting as fast. I don't need all that stuff delivered. Who's going to kick in? parasympathetic. So these two guys, sympathetic, parasympathetic, are constantly monitoring use. And they're going to constantly work synergistically together to do what? Maintain homeostasis. That's the goal. Okay, so when I need more oxygen, we're going to deliver more oxygen. When I don't need so much oxygen, we're going to slow down delivery. And that's the gist of this chapter. Okay, we're done. I'm kidding. No, we're not done. Wouldn't it be nice if it was that easy? There's a quiz. Mm-hmm. I'm jealous. Go ahead. Yep. It's just the way different muscle groups work and your demand. So I'm the same way. I know I'm jealous of the days. Oh, some of you youth are in this classroom as well. When I was to bound up the stairs with no thought. And now it's like, yeah. So it's us getting older, different demands, different deliveries. It's part of getting old. And then different conditionings. Okay, so if you have trouble doing that, then you need to do that more. And that's the one thing I try to avoid as well. Yeah, it's that motion your body is taking upwards rather than straight. So yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I take the elevator a lot. Shh. But I do my steps every day, so I'm okay. I'm good. So sympathetic, parasympathetic, both are going to have fibers, information coming in and out. Both have motor fibers. Different effectors, different pathways, because we can't send information. We can only send information in one direction. Does everybody understand that? Neurons can only fire off from dendrites to axons, one direction. So if I have information that has to come in and out, I need different pathways for that information. Does that make sense? Okay, good. And everybody at this point should understand that. If you don't know what I just said, you've got one hell of a weekend ahead of you. Okay? Because what's happening next week? You have a test, and you should hopefully have been doing what this whole time? Studying. It's a lot of stuff. So, different effectors, different pathways, different ganglia. And what are ganglia? Little groups of cell bodies that sit where? Say what? Say it louder so the teacher can hear you. Well, they're groups of cell bodies right outside the spinal cord that are going to help channel that information to where it needs to go, right? Target organs, different neurotransmitters, different delivery systems for different messages. Well, motor is what? I'm not going to tell you, because you better know it by now. Somebody knows it out there. Dorsal, ventral. Dorsal is sensory. Ventral is motor. Yes? Okay. So the effectors, the results, things like somatic nervous system innervating skeletal muscles, autonomic nervous system innervating things that happen automatically. Give me an example of things that happen automatically without you thinking about it. This, you know all of this. See? So that's why I say don't panic, because a lot of this stuff, it's repeat stuff. You know it. You just have to stop and think about it. Things that happen automatically. Innervating heartbeat, right? Cardiac muscle. Do I have to think about pushing food through my tubes in the digestive system? No. Thank God. Another thing to think of I don't have to worry about. Smooth muscle. When we look at those tubes, that's smooth muscle. So the autonomic nervous system is going to innervate smooth muscle. Glands. Do I have to think about, oh my goodness, I just ate a donut, I must now produce insulin and release it? thank goodness I don't have to think about that either. It happens automatically. So glands to secrete their products. Again, all of this is to help maintain what? Homeostasis. So, efferent leaving pathways and ganglia. They're going to outline them for you. I'm not going to get crazy about this information. I'm not going to make you memorize this information. But I want you to have a general idea that somatic nervous system is sending messages where? What's soma? Body. So we're going to hit stuff in the body. We're going to leave through spinal and cranial nerves to things that we cause to move, skeletal muscles. Autonomic pathways, automatic pathways. Do you see the breakdown here? So somatic, autonomic. Somatic, I think about it, I do it. Usually some kind of skeletal muscle involved. Yes? Because you can't really think about secreting insulin and squirting out some thyroid hormone. That's not something you have control over. Preganglionic neurons, postganglionic neurons. Before the group of cell bodies, after the group of cell bodies. Little thingies in the way. So the postganglionic neuron, the one that's after the group of cell bodies. So remember, we're talking efferent, leaving the central nervous system, right? So we're coming down the spinal cord, we're coming out the spinal cord. The preganglionic neuron, lightly myelinated. The postganglionic neuron, after that little group of cell bodies. Remember, we're talking about leaving now. We're going to find a lot of postganglionic axons that are then going to extend to what? The organs, the result, the effectors. Okay, and some outside the central nervous system are non-myelinated. So there's only a short distance that they're going to travel. Most of them tend to be what? If I have to travel a long distance and I'm an axon, I better be what? Myelinated, exactly. So neurotransmitters, we talked a little bit about that earlier on in chapter 11. We're going to revisit some of the neurotransmitters and their pathways here in this chapter. And that's basically the kind of information I want you to know near the end of this chapter. All those somatic motor neurons release a very familiar neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, ACH. So you're going to see this one a lot. And every time they use an example in the book, they use this guy as an example because it's very common, especially when we talk about the motor end plate and skeletal muscle stimulation. When we go to the next chapter of study, the what? What are we going to do after the nervous system? Muscles, okay? We're going to talk about acetylcholine a lot. In the autonomic nervous system, we have a couple of different guys that are going to help us relay that message. So we have acetylcholine that's going to help us, and we also have norepinephrine, which is another neurotransmitter. And just like my explanation of sympathetic, parasympathetic, speed up, slow down, sometimes we have to speed up and slow down response, stimulus, message being sent. So we can either stimulate, speed up, send more message, or we can inhibit, slow down, send less message. So we're going to see that there's different types of receptors, autonomic nervous system receptors. And speed up, slow down, that has to do with who? Sympathetic and parasympathetic. So that's why this sentence is here as well. So we're going to see that there's different types of neurotransmitters, different receptors, different pathways. Sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic nervous system versus somatic nervous system. Typically when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, we might have much shorter pathways of information to follow. So sometimes we're going to see some neurons in these pathways of communication might be very lightly myelinated or might be even non-myelinated, depending on how short the pathway is. When we talk about pathways with respect to the somatic nervous system, typically we're always going to find neurons that are what? Heavily myelinated, because they have to do what? That message has to travel long distances. Awesome. Very good. So sometimes we see an overlap, some crossroads in our pathways of somatic and autonomic function. That does happen in several different pathways of innervation. Again, I'm not going to get crazy about that. Just understand that some of these crossroads do cross each other with respect to somatic and autonomic function. Some of the divisions of the autonomic nervous system: sympathetic, speed up; parasympathetic, slow down. And sometimes we have groups that kind of do a little bit of both. Again, those crossroads that we see mentioned in the previous slide. So we have what we call dual innervation pathways. Visceral organs served by both divisions but cause opposite effects. So they kind of counteract each other. When we talk about breathing rate, what we're going to see when we discuss that second semester is we're going to see there's two areas, and we find them in the medulla oblongata, my favorite word in science. And we're constantly being told to speed up our breathing. Are you constantly breathing fast? No. So what do you think's happening to that group of messages? Yeah, they're getting ones that are counteracting them. So when I'm sitting here just kind of hanging out, I don't need to be breathing that fast, even though that center is constantly sending message. So the other group is saying, no, stopping the message. Until what happens? I get on the treadmill or I run to the bookstore for my cookies. Yes? Has anybody bought any bookstore goodies? Not to change the subject. Yummy, yummy. You haven't been down there. Oh, it's just so beautiful. Well, they have donuts from a local bakery, Italian bakery. I go down and I stare at the case. And then I go away. But also our culinary arts department does a lovely job baking goods too. So they sell their homework down there. Huh? Every time they have like a group project, they'll have a whole bunch of goodies. I do highly recommend the chocolate mint brownies. To die for. But the hermit cookies, again, are one of my near and dear to my heart. So we also have antagonism between the two divisions. And again, when we talk about respiratory system, you'll say, oh yeah, I remember when she was talking about that first semester. Okay? Again, all to maintain homeostasis, to keep that even, steady state. And when we talk about the respiratory system, what's my job as the respiratory system to keep even and steady state? Huh? The breathing helps me do this, but what's my job? Oxygen. I'm constantly have to maintain a certain amount of oxygen so I can deliver it to my tissues so they can do their thing. So that's my job as the respiratory system. Now, I'm going to get information about that job from who? The nervous system, right? Just like the thermostat in your house. That's controlling somebody that has a job in your house, right? Who's it controlling? The furnace. The furnace has a job. What's the furnace's job? To make heat and keep you warm. But what's the thermostat do? Yeah, it tells it when it needs to go on and when it needs to go off. Now, the furnace doesn't know what temperature it is in your house. Doesn't care. All it does is go on, make heat, and shut off when it's told. Right? And that's kind of how you work too. When I start producing or pumping out insulin, I don't know how much I'm doing. I'm just, nervous system told me pump out the insulin, that's what I'm going to do. Until the nervous system tells me what? Slow that down. Yes? To maintain what? Homeostasis. So, promotes maintenance of different activities, helps to conserve energy. We are eukaryotic organisms. We have very complex cells that have very complex jobs. And we need a lot of energy to do the work to be humans, to be eukaryotic organisms. So our systems, as complex organisms, are constantly trying to make sure that we conserve as much energy as possible so we don't run out of energy to do our work. So that's the job of some of the autonomic nervous system pathways in the parasympathetic division, to direct things like digestion. What's diuresis? Yeah, making urine, waste, and whatever I couldn't use in the digestive system, what do I have to do with that? Get rid of it as well, defecation. So when we relax and read after a meal, we have to direct our circulatory system to be more in one place than others. I just ate. Do I need tons of blood in my lower limbs? No, I need enough to make those cells do what they need to do, but not like I needed when I was on the treadmill, right? Who needs more blood now? I just ate a meal. The digestive organs. So these guys are going to help direct by telling things to speed up and slow down. Blood, for example, where it needs to go. Blood pressure. When we talk about the cardiovascular system next semester, we're going to talk about the importance of pressure within the cardiovascular system. The pressure in the system is going to direct where our delivery goes. When we talked about osmosis and diffusion way back when in the beginning chapters, we talked about something called a concentration gradient, right? Things like to go from a high concentration to a low concentration. Pressure. We're going to talk about that second semester more, because we also have to set up what we call a pressure gradient. And things want to go from a high pressure to a low pressure. So blood pressure, pressure within the system, and blood is basically a delivery system, right? Has to be at a certain rate in order for that pressure difference to be set up. So I can deliver what I'm carrying. Where do I deliver what I'm carrying in blood? Where does the delivery part happen? No, the part's just a pump. It's just pushing all the stuff through. At the ends of my veins and arteries. What do we call that? Anybody know? Begins with a C. Capillary beds. That's the delivery place. If the pressure is too high, I'm going to do what? Deliver too much. Anybody work with patients who have high blood pressure? One of the side effects is what? Say it out loud. Dizziness, fainting. Think more peripheral. Tingling, numbing, swelling. Inflammation, edema. Huh. How come? Capillary beds are pushing out too much what? Fluid. Exactly. And we can't get it back where it's supposed to go into the circulatory system, right? So some of your patients have those cute little socks. What are those doing for the patients besides being a real pain in the ass to put on? They create an opposite pressure to help push some of that fluid back into the circulatory system. So pressure in the system is extremely important to maintain. Heart rate is going to have an effect on that. Breathing rate, respiratory rate. We're going to take care of oxygen levels as well. Gastrointestinal tract activity, also pushing things through the digestive system when you eat your breakfast. Who ate their breakfast this morning? I got a lot of no hands. Sure. I didn't say good breakfast, I said breakfast, yeah. So also, what we see as a side effect of some of these reactions is muscular stimulation that might not necessarily be related. We talk about things like fight or flight. If I came at you right now and was going to sock you in the head, one of the things you might notice, besides your reflex movements like what, with your arms going up and all that good stuff, and that little, some of those spinal things we talked about in the last chapter, we'd also see something happen to your pupils. We're going to do this in lab. You hear a loud noise or you feel a touch. You might also get stimulation in some other pathways to other muscles that really aren't related to anything that's going to help you react to that stimulus. So you'll see your pupils widen. Yes? Okay. So, mobilization of body function during fight or flight, exercise, excitement, emergency, embarrassment, all responsible for, or the responsibility of, what division of the autonomic nervous system? The sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. So we see all sorts of things happening under this category of emergency. Again, you'll see pupils doing some strange things. You also might slow some other non-essential functions down. Do you really need to salivate when you're running away from a invader or intruder or something bad? No. So what happens? We'll slow that down. That's not really necessary that you salivate right now. So you'll see things like dry mouth. Circulatory system is going to send more blood to other places besides your extremities right now. Sweaty skin might develop. Temperature changes might develop. So we're going to see increases in some of these different messages being sent during this time. Vigorous physical activity. We need more blood where? Skeletal muscles. I'm moving. I need more blood. I need more oxygen. Metabolism is happening, so the delivery system shunts more blood to skeletal muscles. Also, if I want to get that blood there at a faster rate, who do I need to help me do that? The heart, the pump. When we talk about the cardiovascular system, second semester, the heart is a pump. That's all it is. So if I want to get stuff there faster, I have to speed up the pump. The pump needs food too, right? So we see that during physical activity, we speed up delivery to the heart. Dilates bronchioles. What's a dilate and who's a bronchiole? Dilate is get bigger, and what's a bronchiole? In the lungs. Why? Yeah, more air moves through faster. Causes liver to release glucose. What the heck do I need glucose for? Now I have other things to concentrate on. Yeah, we have to, since we're speeding up activities, we need to speed up delivery of glucose so that we can make more energy. So some of the differences between the sympathetic and parasympathetic division can be seen on this table, table 14.1 on page 529. Am I going to make you memorize this table? No. Okay, here's a scary little diagram. But this is an example of some of the different pathways we see, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Am I going to make you memorize this? No. But we see that there's different spinal nerves responsible for innervating, speeding up, slowing down, different systems, and we see that they have very distinct and different pathways. That makes sense, right? Remember, I can only go in one direction. So I don't want to cross too many paths. So we see that, and the next thing we're going to talk about is the names for all these pathways. Again, I'm not going to make you memorize those either. But we see that thoracic, lumbar, and cervical and sacral are very distinct and different from each other. And we see that they have very distinct and different pathways, both sympathetic and parasympathetic. So we have a group called the craniosacral division. And again, if you look at that diagram, the craniosacral division is what? What color are the arrows? That's kind of like purple, isn't it? So the cranium and the sacral divisions, craniosacral division of the parasympathetic nervous system, are going to have groups of neurons. And we saw that little diagram. We had little short ones and little long ones, and some were kind of myelinated and some were unmyelinated. Again, I'm not going to make you memorize that. But remember, sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions have different combinations of neurons that get their message where it needs to go. So that's basically what they're talking about here. And I'm not going to make you memorize that. Some of the parts of the cranial division of the parasympathetic division have cell bodies that are in the brainstem, cranial. Move things sort of facially. Again, vagus nerve was the one that kind of traveled out of the cranial nerve territory. So vagus nerve has some innervation regions that go lower in the thoracic and the abdominal visceral region. So the sacral part is going to serve who? The bottom, pelvic regions. And again, we see some of the organs that are innervated by the craniosacral division of the parasympathetic nervous system. So, head, butt, serving all these different areas of the body. Parasympathetic is doing what? Slowing things down. Okay? Again, I'm not going to make you memorize each of these divisions, but understand cranial and sacral parasympathetic, and they are going to help slow things down. And if you look at this little map, we pretty much hit everybody. So that everybody has parasympathetic, most everybody has parasympathetic innervation, that ability to slow things down when they slow down. And who's responsible for parasympathetic innervation in the autonomic nervous system? What division? Head and butt, or craniosacral? Yes? So, middle region, who's that? Who's the middle vertebrae? Thoracic, right? Thoracolumbar. Thoracolumbar. I can never pronounce that word. Thorax lumbar, yes? So we have some vertebrae in the chest region and in the lumbar region, okay? Where is that information going to be delivered? And this is not parasympathetic now. What is this? This is sympathetic. So we have a whole different group of pathways, not the head and the butt. All those guys in the middle that are responsible for innervating. And if you look at the list, did we hit everybody again? Yeah, pretty much. If you take that picture That's on page 528. And you compare it to the picture on page 532. We pretty much hit everybody. Same organs, right? There's a couple of little glands, but for the most part we've hit mostly all the major organs, okay? That have what? Sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. So this diagram is showing you the what? The sympathetic innervation from the central regions. So butt and head, parasympathetic, craniosacral. Sympathetic, a little bit of lumbar, a little bit of thoracic in those central regions. Again, this is all the different names for all the different ganglia, how many we have, da 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 da. I'm not going to make you memorize that. This is a picture of some of the pathways as they leave and enter some of the different ganglion. I'm not going to make you memorize that. So, discussion of where all these pathways branch off and come in, not going to make you memorize that. Picture of some of the different pathways and their effects. So again, we see in this case a sympathetic innervation and some of the different pathways it can take, coming from lateral horns, the visceral motor zone in this case, and going out to an effector, which in this case happens to be your skin and your blood vessels. So sometimes we have a reaction to things and we get goosebumps. Does that ever happen? Or you start to sweat. Guess where goosebumps and sweating take place? In the where? Why do you get goosebumps? Do you know why you get goosebumps? It warmed me up, but it's also a reaction to fear. Have you ever, somebody scared the bejesus out of you and you go, ooh, I just got goosebumps? No? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a reaction to that stimulus. So goosebumps come from a stimulus from the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system. See how we're going down the line? That stimulate a tiny little muscle that is attached to your hair follicles called the erector pili muscle. We'll discuss it when we discuss skin. When it contracts, it pulls on the hair follicle. Goosebumps. You get it when you're cold because you're trying to increase muscle contraction so you can increase what? Heat. Because the contraction of muscle, what's a waste product of muscle contraction? Heat production. And you also get it when somebody scares the crap out of you too. Yep. Yep. Were you nervous about the whole situation?
Yeah, because I really liked it.
Yeah. So that was happening. Yeah.
I even said after to the doctor, I said, it's so weird. I said, I'm frozen. My nose is cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So stress and fear can do that to you too. We're diverting things to other places where our bodies think it's more necessary. So that's, yeah. So blood vessels, they can either constrict or dilate depending on what the stimulus is. So you sometimes, if you get nervous, say I tell you right now, okay, I'm tired, so you're going to have to get up and lecture the class right now. What might happen to you? You might get all red, flushed, embarrassed. Who's stimulating the blood vessels to do what in your skin? When you get red and flushed, what happens to the blood vessels in your skin? They dilate and move closer to the what? They move closer to the surface because you're going to start giving off some excess heat because you're nervous. So you can do both depending on your reaction. Okay, so come on up. It's time for you to, oh, no. Okay. So, different pathways that innervate, sympathetic innervation, speed things up, slow things down, defer pathways depending on the need for our bodies. Postganglionic axons after the ganglia enter the ventral rami. So are we talking coming into the central nervous system or leaving the central nervous system? If I'm entering a ventral rami, I'm going to leave the central nervous system, and they are going to innervate things like sweat glands, those little erector pili muscles, vascular smooth muscle contraction. Blood vessels are going to help deliver more blood, dilate, release more heat, depending on the reaction. Some of the pathways to the head are in that thoracic region too. Again, if I'm talking thoracic region, is it sympathetic or parasympathetic? Sympathetic, very good. Innervate skin, blood vessels to the head, dilate muscles of the iris. So again, that fright, you might see your iris muscles cause your pupils to become much larger. Nasal and salivary glands, you don't really need to be smelling stuff right now, and you're good with the whole spit thing because you have other things to do. Innervate smooth muscle of the upper eyelids. Has anybody's eyes ever like fluttered when they're nervous? Got that little nervous twitch in your eye? Yep. And then information to the heart. So they talk about some of those different thoracic pathways. Again, these are sympathetic. We have information that's going to cardiac. And when we talk second semester about information being sent to cardiac, we're sending electrical stimulus to a group of cells that are going to help control the rate of your heartbeat. These cells are called autorhythmic cells. And they're going to control how fast or slow your heart beats. But where do they get message from? It's time to take your medicine. No? Okay. Where do they get message from? The autorhythmic cells control your heart, because everybody just got distracted, so let's get back on track. The autorhythmic cells control the rhythm of your heart rate, but who do they get their messages from? I have to go get more cookies. I have to run on the treadmill. Yeah, the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. So that's going to send messages with respect to heart rate. Then they're going to pick up the ball and control your heartbeat. So cardiac plexus of nerves is going to help with heart rate. When I need to speed up activity, I might need to speed up metabolism. I need to speed up the rate at which reactions are taking place in my body. And there's some hormonal control of that from a group of glands called the thyroids. So those are also going to play a role in helping to speed up or slow down chemistry that's going on within my cells. And then, of course, my lungs might also innervate esophagus, swallowing. Don't worry about this. Again, more pathways to different things with respect to where and when and why. Pathways to the abdomen, lower thoracic regions, upper lumbar regions. Messages to the liver and the spleen and the kidneys and the stomach down in those lower or upper lumbar regions, lower of the sympathetic innervations. Pathways to the pelvis, kind of the same thing. Adrenal medulla, we're going to talk next semester when we talk about the endocrine system. We are going to talk about its role in maintaining homeostasis in the body. So when we talk about homeostasis in general, the two systems that are going to help us with that are the nervous system, and all the stuff we're talking about now, and the endocrine system, glands, secreting what? Hormones. So the nervous system also may have control over the secretions of the endocrine system. So we're going to see stimulation of different neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and epinephrine that are going to help stimulate the release of different hormones to maintain homeostasis. Okay? The adrenal medulla is going to be part of our discussion, and this is the guy that makes these they're hormones and they're neurotransmitters, norepinephrine and epinephrine. Visceral reflexes. So we talked about somatic reflexes, right? When I banged my book and I poked you in the hand with a nail and I made you put your hand on a hot oven, right? But we also have reflexes to react to things that are going on viscerally as well. Everybody understands the difference between somatic and visceral, right? Good. So we see that there's different pathways here as well, different pain fibers that are sending message to the central nervous system as far as damage viscerally. We talked a little bit about referred pain too, right? And that sometimes we can set off different pathways and feel like we're having pain in one place where it's actually the damage is coming from another place. And again, that has to do with crossover of some of these pathways in the autonomic nervous system. Very similar pathways to what we saw in the somatic reflex. We have some sort of receptor in the viscera. So say we're having a heart attack. We have a receptor in the viscera that sends visceral sensory messages to the spinal column. We have a direct motor response or visceral effect. So you might not necessarily be aware of the visceral effect, but with respect to pain, you might be able to feel that somewhere else. So we're constantly speeding up and slowing things down that you're not even aware of. You know, when that cheeseburger hits the stomach, hangs out there for a while, sloshes around in the hydrochloric acid and gastric juice, well, after a while we have to push it on to the next part of the digestive process. Does anybody know what that is? Small intestine. So who's going to tell me? Squeeze the stomach, push it through the trap door, put it in the small intestine. There you go. So we'll get stimulation from the central nervous system. Again, this is autonomic, that's going to help push things through, cause and effect. Again, we might not even be aware of it unless there's pain in that area or there's damage in that area, and then we're aware of problems going on. So these visceral reflexes are going to help push things along, cause and effect, and many times we're not even aware of them. Okay, different types of neurotransmitters, different types of receptors. This is where you need to know this information. So, cholinergic fibers are ones that release acetylcholine as their neurotransmitter. And adrenergic fibers release the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, or NE. So when we talk about autonomic nervous system, and we're talking pre-ganglionic axons, before that group of cell bodies, before we enter the what? Ganglia are right outside where? Spinal cord. Most of those guys are cholinergic fibers. Then we hand off to the shorter guys, adrenergic fibers, postganglionic. We see a picture of somatic. This looks familiar, doesn't it? Preganglionic, postganglionic. Again, different degrees of myelination depending on the distance we have to travel. Whether we're coming out or going into the central nervous system, delivering message to an effector, or bringing message in for processing. When we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, remember we're always pretty much talking about information going where? From the central nervous system out. Yes? So when we say preganglionic and postganglionic, preganglionic is coming from the central nervous system to the ganglia, and postganglionic is taking message from the ganglia going somewhere. Okay? Yes? So we're talking motor here in this chapter. So, cholinergic receptors for acetylcholine, adrenergic receptors for norepinephrine. There's two types of receptors that bind acetylcholine. One's called a nicotinic receptor, and one is called a muscarinic receptor. And these are named after certain drugs that can bind to them and mimic the effects of acetylcholine. So, nicotinic receptors, think skeletal muscle. When we talk about muscle, we'll talk about the nervous system innervating skeletal muscle, stimulating skeletal muscle to change. That connection between the two is referred to as the neuromuscular junction. So that NMJ that you see there is neuromuscular junction, the meeting between the nervous system and the skeletal muscle or muscle cells. Acetylcholine at nicotinic receptors is always stimulatory. So when a nicotinic receptor releases acetylcholine, what's it always going to cause? That's some sort of action potential, some sort of depolarization, repolarization. Everybody knows those terms, right? Because those are going to be on your test too. We're going to use those same terms when we talk about muscle contraction too. So we're not going to only learn it for firing off a neuron. We're going to use the exact same terms when we fire off a muscle cell or change the chemistry and cause, in the case of a muscle cell, when I change the chemistry, what's going to happen to it? It's going to shorten. In the case of a neuron, when I fire it off, what's going to happen? It's going to release some sort of chemical at the end. Some sort of neurotransmitter is going to be released. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes? You are?
There's a lot of missing.
Yeah, there's a lot of like that. The very first one.
Do you want me to upload this when I get back to my office? Okay. Okay, I'll upload and I'll put it in the same lecture outline folder, but I'll call it Chapter 14 PowerPoint. Okay? I didn't realize there was a discrepancy. I apologize.
Just a few little
Few differences.
Says open ion channels, depolarize. We don't have that, and there's been a few other pages where there's some little bullets that are not there.
Okay.
A lot of the post is missing and some of the post.
Okay. So I will upload and I'll call it PowerPoint instead of outline. Okay? All right. Muscarinic receptors. We're going to find them where? What's a postganglionic cholinergic fiber? After the ganglion, and a cholinergic fiber is what? Something that releases what kind of neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine, exactly. So again, we find these guys that can either be inhibitory or excitatory. Because remember, we have to have a balance of both. So we have to, at sometimes, inhibit things from happening, slow them down, stop them from happening. Otherwise, we'll go into sensory overload with respect to the stimulus that's being sent. So it depends on the receptor, depends on the target organ, but think we can also inhibit things as well when we have those guys present and accounted for. This is the cholinergic and adrenergic receptor breakdown. Just know the two terms. I'm not going to get crazy about where they're located. I am not going to get crazy about the effects of binding. Just be familiar with the two terms. Know that there's different types of receptors. We have an alpha receptor, we have a beta receptor. Those are the two different classes of those adrenergic receptors. Different effects of different drugs on these receptors. We have, has anybody ever heard of atropine? And what's that doing for me? Sometimes you'll hear it when somebody has to go for surgery. And it slows what down? Salivation. Why do I want to slow salivation down during surgery? Yeah, you want to slow as much down that's going down into the stomach as possible. That's, excuse me, that's why they don't want you to do what before surgery? They don't want you to eat because they don't want anything to come back up. So they want to slow that down, not because they want things, worried about things going to your stomach. They're worried about things going where? Into your lungs. We share a common pathway there. So the more I salivate, the more chance I might get something into my lungs. And what's that called when I'm not supposed to get stuff? Yeah, the more chance I might aspirate something. And also, it helps to relieve nausea symptoms. Anybody ever have postnasal drip and feel like they, ate a turkey dinner? Or you get nausea because you're sending all that stuff down to your stomach. So we want to relieve those two things with a drug called atropine. And atropine is going to block some of those muscarinic acetylcholine receptors, so I can slow that down. This word I don't know how to pronounce. Anybody ever hear this word? I think it's neostigmine, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. I have to forget. I couldn't get my pronunciation dictionary to work today. But it inhibits acetylcholine esterase. Now, what does acetylcholine esterase do? Breaks down acetylcholine and stops. If I have a receptor or some sort of neuron that is sending out acetylcholine, what's it doing to the next guy in line? Firing him off. So I have acetylcholine esterase that's going to help break down that acetylcholine and stop the message. Well, if I break down acetylcholine esterase, the message is going to keep what? Keep being sent. And what's myasthenia gravis? Yeah, and it's sometimes an understimulation of certain neuron groups. So kidneys did what? Yeah, they slowed down. So we want to make sure we allow that message to be sent. And that's what is going on here. Does that make sense? If I slow down message for some reason, this is going to help speed up message. by inhibiting the inhibitor of acetylcholine. Colds, allergies, nasal congestion, alpha adrenergic receptors. They're going to slow down what? What do you want to slow down when you have colds and allergies and nasal congestion? Mucus production, exactly. Beta blockers, what are we doing there? Yeah, calming down some of the messages that are being sent to the cardiac group we just discussed earlier. We might have drugs that can affect the bronchiole, allow them to dilate normally. So breathing can happen normally. Again, don't worry about all this craziness. Interesting information for you. Most visceral organs have dual innervation, information slowing, information speeding up. And that's what this talks about. And we see the different things described in table 14.4 and some of the effects, parasympathetic and sympathetic, and that's on page 536, to things like the eyes and the salivary glands, sweat glands. Again, we see that at certain times we have to slow things down, at certain times we have to speed things up. So with respect to the eye, if I have parasympathetic innervation from the autonomic nervous system, what's going to happen to my pupil? If the pupil constricts, what's going to happen? It's going to get smaller. If I have sympathetic, what's going to happen to the pupil? It's going to get bigger. So when we talk special senses, the beginning of next semester, we're going to see that the retina in the back of this pupil, what is a pupil? It's a hole. Exactly. It's not a thing. You can't go and pull out your pupil. No, it's just a hole. It's a big black hole. Why is it black? It's dark in there. Sometimes when you light it up, you actually see what color it is. What color is it? Red. Like when you take a picture of somebody and the angle of light that comes in hits just right and bounces back out, you got those big red scary eyes looking at you. It's because you lit up that chamber and the light bounced back and the camera caught it. So if when the doctor goes and looks in there to see everything, he shines a light through your pupil and looks around at your retina back there. And we're going to find the receptors for vision there. Now I have to make sure that the amount of light that comes in is just right, otherwise I'm not going to be able to see clearly. So the pupil, that hole, the size of it is controlled by a group of muscles that surround it, called the iris. So when the light is really bright, and I don't want too much coming in, what happens? Tell me sympathetic, parasympathetic. Parasympathetic innervation from the central nervous system is going to cause what to happen? The hole to become smaller, less light to come in. Now what if I'm outside at night and I'm trying to find my black lab in the backyard? And why she can't just go in the same darn place? I can hear her rustling around in the woods, but I'm like, oh, just, have you pooped? I can't see. What am I doing? Yeah, sympathetic innervation of my pupil or iris is causing what? That hole to become large, pupil dilate. Yes? Okay. I'm not going to go through all of them, and I'm not going to make you memorize all of them. But you're going to hear this again as we go through the different systems. So I'm going to say, remember sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic division? We're going to talk about them again. And all the different organs have them. So parasympathetic, sympathetic division are constantly working with each other, hand in hand, sometimes against each other, to maintain homeostasis. And sympathetic division is also going to help us control vascular integrity, blood pressure, Some alpha blockers, again, certain chemical blockers of certain message being sent through the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, can help to treat blood pressure or hypertension. So you can really impress your doctor if you have high blood pressure. You can say, oh my goodness, are we innervating sympathetic, are we inhibiting any sympathetic innervation of my blood vessels to help control my blood pressure here with this medication, doctor? I'm going to look at you and go impress your doctor. Parasympathetic division normally dominates the heart, smooth muscle, digestive, urinary. Again, we'll talk about these when we talk about the different systems. Sympathetic division can override these effects during times of stress. So again, override, work against, working together. Cooperative effects in the genitalia, vasodilation, can help with arousal, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the reproductive system at the end of second semester. Adrenal medulla, sweat glands, those little goosebump muscles, the erector pili, kidneys, blood vessels are some of the sympathetic division's job. Thermoregulation, what's that? Heat, remember? And one of the ways to control heat really fast, two ways. If I'm cold, what do? Shiver, erector pili muscle. If I'm hot, what do? Sweat. Who's making me sweat? Oh, the nervous system making me sweat. A sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system is making me sweat. But who's producing the sweat? Glands in the skin, the integumentary system. I'm also giving off heat too. How do I give off more heat faster, quick? If I take those blood vessels and I move them closer to the surface and I dilate them. So sometimes I get red when I get hot and sweaty, yes? Because you're seeing more of the pigment, hemoglobin, closer to the surface of the skin. Yes? Wow, this is amazing what you're learning, yes? Also, when I start burning more energy, I need to have more molecules available to make more energy. So we're going to see the sympathetic division has an indirect effect on metabolic rate. Increase chemistry to make more energy. Don't worry about that. Long-term, short-term, longer-lasting. Sympathetic division and the chemical message that are being sent from the sympathetic division tend to last a little bit longer than the parasympathetic messages. Who controls these autonomic functions? The hypothalamus, when we talked earlier about its role in the brain, hypothalamus is also going to help with autonomic nervous system functions. Cerebral input, limbic system, cerebral cortex, the reticular formation, some centers in the spinal cord. So we have a little bit of information in those central, quick-to-reach brain regions that control automatic or autonomic function. Hypothalamus plays a big role, that central brain, in heart activity, blood pressure, temperature, water balance, all of those wonderful things. And we see the connection between all of them here in this diagram on page 538, figure 14.8 in your textbook. So again, the hypothalamus is a big autonomic nervous system controller, and that's why we call it the what? The boss. He's the overall control. So he's going to control things coming from higher brain regions and going out to where they need to go to cause an effect in the autonomic nervous system. There's a little cortical connection there that helps with the awareness of some of the different things we discussed. Hypertension, high blood pressure, Raynaud's disease, kind of the opposite, problems with enough pressure getting blood to the extremities can be a problem with the autonomic nervous system control. So I might have too much fluid in my system that can lead to blood pressure. It might be a direct or indirect result of problems with autonomic nervous system innervation. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. As we get old, everything stops working. And we're done with chapter 14. Yes?
Do you have some hints about the essay questions?
I do, and you know what? I'm a bad teacher because I forgot to put them up early like I